Old Man Williams was once the roaring lion of his city, a man whose name alone commanded respect, whose handshake sealed million-dollar deals, and whose generosity built schools, hospitals, and homes for those less fortunate. Yet now, as he sat in the dim quiet of his grand study, surrounded by portraits of smiling children, a sprawling estate, and decades of achievement, he felt only one piercing question gnawing at his fragile heart. Who among those he had raised and showered with comfort truly loved him when all the gold and glamour faded? His body was growing weak with age, his voice thinner with each word, and in the polished glass of the cabinet he no longer saw the powerful businessman who once stood tall, but a frail man clinging to the threads of family affection. That evening, as the grandfather clock ticked with eerie patience, he called his most trusted allies, Mr. John, the family lawyer whose loyalty had never wavered, and Dr. Maxwell, the personal physician who knew the rhythms of his heartbeat better than most, to sit with him in confidence. "I want to know the truth," Williams whispered, his eyes fixed on the fire crackling low in the hearth. "Not the truth of numbers or assets, but the truth of hearts. When I am too weak to walk, when I cannot speak, when money seems to vanish like smoke, who will remain by my side? Who loves me for me?" The lawyer leaned forward, the weight of his spectacles glinting as he replied carefully, "Sir, if you truly want to see their colors, then you must first dim the lights of your fortune, hide part of your wealth, transfer it quietly into a secure account only I can manage, leave what remains in the open. That way, if they are playing roles, they will fight over the scraps they see." Williams nodded slowly, a shadow of a smile tugging at his lips at the cleverness of the idea, and turned his gaze to the doctor. Dr. Maxwell, who had seen countless families unravel in the face of diagnosis, placed a hand on his shoulder and said with grave sincerity, "Then I will tell them you have cancer. I will say you have less than 6 months to live. I will prescribe the look of despair. And we shall watch, sir, who mourns your soul and who counts your coins." The silence that followed was thick as fate itself, the kind of silence in which destinies are decided. Williams inhaled deeply, nodded once, and thus the plan was set in motion, a stage for love and greed, faith and betrayal to reveal themselves under the same roof. By morning, the great mansion which once buzzed with laughter and servants' footsteps now echoed with the sound of coughing, loud and deliberate, each bark of the throat meant to summon sympathy. Curtains were drawn, sunlight dimmed, and trays of untouched meals gathered dust by the bedside. The news of his illness spread like wildfire, first whispered among the maids, then rushing like a storm into the ears of his wife Agatha and their children, Frank, the ambitious first son, David, the sharp-tongued second son, Cynthia, the flamboyant first daughter, and Rose, the tender-hearted youngest. They gathered quickly in his room, their faces painted with shock. "Let's call the doctor," Cynthia cried, her eyes wide but darting toward her phone, as if already composing the story she would later share online. Soon Dr. Maxwell arrived, carrying his medical bag and a face rehearsed in sorrow. He examined Williams with cold instruments, pressed his chest, took his pulse, then turned toward the family with a sigh so heavy it seemed to weigh down the air. "I am sorry," he announced gravely. "Your father is very sick. It is cancer. He has less than 6 months to live." Gasps erupted. Rose fell to her knees by the bed, clutching her father's trembling hand, sobbing, "No, Daddy, please don't leave me." Even Frank and David, usually so composed, shifted uneasily as though a throne had grown legs. Agatha pressed her hand to her chest and sat heavily, whispering, "Oh God, not my husband." For a few days after that, the performance of care was immaculate. Trays of soup were brought, words of comfort spoken, hands patted his shoulder. They sat by his side as though vigil had already begun. But Williams, watching with eyes half closed, knew the test had only just begun. For love is not proven by the first act of shock, but by the long grind of days that follow, when the glamour of tragedy wears thin. He coughed again, softer this time, and in that sound lay the secret of the drama to come.
The mansion that once glittered with laughter and light was now heavy with dread. Its grand chandeliers dimmed, its marble floors echoing only with hushed whispers. And in the center of it all lay Old Man Williams, propped weakly on pillows, his cough rehearsed but convincing, a frail king on a bed of shadows. And around him stood his family, their faces pale with fear, or so it seemed at first. For when Dr. Maxwell arrived with his medical bag, his grave tone cut through the room like a knife, declaring, "It is cancer, stage 4, 6 months at most." And the words struck Agatha like lightning. She gasped, clutched her chest, and slumped onto the sofa, while Frank's sharp eyes flickered not only with shock, but with quick calculations. And David gritted his teeth as though swallowing both grief and anger. Cynthia burst into tears that sounded a shade too rehearsed, while Rose, the youngest, clung to her father's hand as if the world were collapsing, whispering through sobs, "Daddy, I won't leave you. I'll stay right here." And for a moment, the room looked united by sorrow, yet the cracks had already begun to form. In the following days, the performance of care bloomed with almost theatrical precision. Agatha ordered trays of soup and fruits, yet hardly stepped into the sick room herself, complaining the sight of sickness broke her spirit. Cynthia posted filtered photos of her sad face with captions like "Pray for Daddy," while her heels clicked out of the house for shopping trips. David promised to handle business travel, yet disappeared for hours with excuses of meetings that were more often whispers of pleasure. Only Rose remained constant, feeding him pap spoon by spoon, wiping sweat from his forehead, and singing softly into the night to soothe him, even when her own eyes brimmed with exhaustion. While Williams, under half-shut lids, studied them all with the patience of a hunter watching prey circle the bait. But greed is like a seed planted in silence, and within a week its shoots began to break the surface. Frank strode into the study one morning with a folder of papers and a face of false humility, telling his father in a rehearsed tone, "Daddy, you should rest now. The company is too much for you. Let me handle it. I'll protect your legacy." And though William simply nodded with feigned weakness, in his heart he marked the words like tallying debts, for he knew what protection meant in the eyes of a son who licked his lips at boardroom seats. Soon, Frank's hands were everywhere, signatures on contracts, calls to investors, loud parties in the mansion where wine spilled and laughter grew too sharp, his presence in the company swelling like a shadow until he became its new face, and money flowed out like sand through open fingers. David, not to be outdone, began to whisper of investments, lured by a young woman online who demanded expensive gifts and travels. Cynthia raided accounts for wigs, perfumes, and high-end fashion, parading new dresses while her father coughed unseen upstairs. And Agatha, though still wearing the mask of sorrow in public, started counting which lands could be sold quickly, her eyes cold when she thought no one was watching. The house changed rhythm, once a place of reverence, now filled with loud music, quarrels, and slammed doors, while upstairs the old man lay silent, the only sound his feigned wheezing, and at his side, night after night, his youngest daughter Rose, who ignored the noise below, bathing her father's feet, cleaning his sheets, whispering, "Don't worry, Daddy, I'll take care of you," her devotion shining against the selfishness that choked every other corner of the house. And still Williams endured, recording each moment not with ink but with memory, each betrayal cutting deeper, each act of loyalty etching Rose's name brighter into the tablet of his heart. For though he had staged this sickness, the truth that poured out of his family was more bitter than he had imagined. And as the days turned into weeks, the test revealed itself not as a trick, but as a mirror showing him exactly what love looked like and what it did not.
At first, the air in the mansion held a fragile illusion of unity, but like cracks in polished marble, the truth began to split through. For while old man Williams continued his act of coughing fits and weary silences, watching from his bed with eyes that measured every word and action, his family's devotion thinned like smoke. Agatha, once weeping at his bedside, now claimed the sick room suffocated her spirit and retreated to her perfumed chambers, saying she could not bear the smell of death. Cynthia grew scarce, appearing only to flash a pitying smile before vanishing to salons and parties. David spoke constantly of travel, waving tickets and deals, insisting he had no time to sit with his father when business demanded him elsewhere. And only Rose, the youngest, stubborn and gentle, clung to her father's side like a shadow, feeding him soft pap, wiping his brow with warm towels, humming little hymns she remembered from childhood, whispering, "Daddy, I will not leave you," while the others drifted away like birds chasing glitter. Yet the true fracture came when Frank, swollen with ambition, decided the company's reins were his by right. One morning he entered the study in a tailored suit, papers in hand, and without shame told his father, "You should rest now. I will take full control." And though Williams gave a quiet nod, his heart recorded the arrogance like a wound. And soon Frank's shadow spread across the company. Meetings called without invitation, contracts signed in haste, lavish dinners thrown in the name of business morale. Yet seasoned staff like Mr. Deo, who had served Williams for nearly 3 decades, frowned and whispered, "This is not how the chief would have done it." But Frank did not care. He saw the mansion as his kingdom, the company as his playground, and the old man as a dying relic too weak to interfere. At night, music blared from the guest wing where Frank hosted parties with friends, expensive wine spilling on imported carpets, laughter echoing through halls once filled with discipline and reverence, while Williams lay upstairs listening to every sound, his heart breaking not from sickness but from the betrayal of a son who celebrated before his father's grave was even dug. David, not to be left behind, began whispering of ventures, charmed by a young woman online who promised him love if only he could prove his worth with gifts of gold and trips abroad. He diverted funds recklessly, claiming to his siblings he was networking, when in truth he was bleeding the family's wealth for vanity. Cynthia, too, discovered the taste of indulgence, emptying accounts to buy wigs, perfumes, designer gowns, strutting through the house like a model on a runway, her father's groans ignored behind closed doors. And Agatha, hardened by years of comfort, began to eye the estate not as a home, but as an inheritance waiting to be divided, telling herself it was too painful to watch him suffer, when in truth she was calculating lands and jewels. Meanwhile, only Rose saw none of the wealth, none of the allure, only her father's trembling hands, his staged coughs, and what she believed was a soul slipping toward eternity. She knelt by him, held his hands, and wept quietly at night, whispering, "If this were me, Daddy would never leave me alone, so I will not leave him," her devotion a lantern in the deepening darkness of betrayal. Downstairs, servants whispered in corners, the cooks exchanged worried glances, the security men shook their heads, for they could see what was happening. that the family was circling like vultures over a man not yet gone, while the only one to remain pure was the youngest daughter. And in his quiet chamber, Chief Williams, though pretending weakness, though hiding behind the mask of illness, understood with painful clarity that his plan was working too well. For masks had fallen, hearts had been revealed, and what he saw was not the love of a family united, but the hunger of wolves pacing at the edge of a dying fire.
The storm that Old Man Williams had predicted finally broke its first wave when Frank, fueled by the taste of sudden authority, decided that the company's salvation lay not in patience or discipline, but in reckless expansion. And with the swagger of a conqueror, he announced to the board a new vision. "We are launching a luxury fashion line, perfumes, bags, clothes, fit for kings," he declared, his voice booming as if the idea itself were gold. And while the younger managers clapped nervously, older staff, like Mr. Dio and Ms. Linda, exchanged uneasy glances, for they knew such ventures were costly. But Frank silenced all doubts with a slam of his hand on the polished oak table, insisting that loans would cover the costs, that risk was the language of the future, and soon the company's name was plastered on gaudy billboards across the city, advertising overpriced clothing no one wanted. The twist of irony was sharp. While the family thought Williams was dying, his empire, carefully built brick by brick, was now being dismantled in his name. And the cruelest blow came from Frank, who fired the very staff who had built the foundation of that empire. Loyal men and women who had sacrificed weekends, stood by Williams through recessions, and guarded his legacy with sweat and loyalty, now tossed out like scraps, their pleas met with Frank's cold sneer, "My father trusted me. I don't need your advice." Upstairs, Williams lay quietly, his face turned to the wall. But through the miniature camera hidden in the corner, he saw everything. Every word Frank hurled, every insult to Dio, every laugh over wasted funds. And his chest ached not with illness, but with the agony of betrayal. Yet the true blow came from David, who, feeling overshadowed by Frank's reckless theatrics, sought his own path to greatness. And in his impatience, he decided to sell one of his father's proudest creations, the Sunray Grand Hotel, a towering jewel that Williams often called his golden house. David, dressed in sharp suits and speaking with the confidence of a man who thought himself clever, approached the manager, Mr. Felix, declaring, "The hotel is for sale, prepare the paperwork." And though Felix nearly collapsed in shock, pleading, "Sir, this is your father's pride, please don't do this," David silenced him with threats of dismissal, and soon arrangements were made. What David never knew was that the lawyer, Mr. John, had quietly anticipated such moves, and through a network of trusted buyers, he intercepted the deal, securing the deeds in his private safe, protecting them until the time came to restore them. Still, David strutted back into the mansion, boasting to Cynthia that he had secured liquid funds, igniting her fury, for she had eyed that land as her inheritance. And their quarrel erupted into a vicious fight, voices shaking the walls, Cynthia clawing at David's shirt, David shoving her against a table, and Rose rushing in, tears burning in her eyes as she screamed, "Stop it! Stop disgracing Daddy while he still breathes!" Her words fell on deaf ears, their greed too loud to be silenced. But upstairs, Williams heard everything, his heart thudding, whispering to himself, "So this is what I raised. This is the fruit of my years." And while his family below tore at each other like wolves, Rose knelt again by his bed, feeding him quietly, saying, "Don't worry, Daddy. I'll never let you go hungry. I'll never let you suffer alone." Her words a balm against the chaos. Yet the twist was clear. The family believed they were positioning themselves for wealth, but in truth, they were exposing themselves, betraying themselves, and digging their own graves, while the one they thought too weak to act watched and recorded it all, waiting for the day the curtain would finally fall and reveal who had truly won this test of love.
The house that once stood as a fortress of dignity
now groaned under the weight of shame and betrayal. For as old man Williams remained in his bed pretending to wither away, the mansion below became a theater of selfishness, where love was replaced with quarrels, loyalty with greed, and marriage with betrayal. And the first to fall deeper into disgrace was Agatha, the wife who had once stood at his side in victory, who now, unable to mask her loneliness or her hunger for attention, sought comfort in the arms of another. It began with whispers over wine at her friend Margaret's lavish home, Margaret urging with sly laughter, "You are still young, Agatha, still beautiful. Don't waste your years beside a coughing corpse." And though Agatha had tried to resist, the seed was planted, and soon she met Ben, a handsome gym instructor with smooth words and quick charm. And within days, she was sneaking out to hotels, returning with a glow that had nothing to do with grief. Until one afternoon, she shocked the family by dragging Ben into the mansion itself, announcing boldly, "This is my new personal driver," ignoring the gasps and David's bitter whisper of "more like personal toy." And while the children exchanged uneasy looks, Rose said nothing, but her silence was heavy as stone. That night, unable to sleep, she followed the sound of giggles to the boys' quarters, and when she pushed open the door, her eyes froze in horror. Her mother, half-dressed, perched on Ben's lap, kissing him like a schoolgirl. "Mama!" she cried, voice cracking, and Agatha leapt up in shame, while Ben scrambled for his shirt. But Rose's tears were already flowing, her words cutting deeper than any slap. "Daddy is still alive, still fighting, and you betray him for this? You abandon him for your pleasure?" Agatha, breathing hard, snapped back. "You don't understand, Rose. I am lonely. I need love. Your father cannot give me that anymore." But Rose turned away in disgust, whispering, "He gave you everything, Mama, and this is how you repay him," and stormed out, broken. Upstairs, through the hidden cameras, William saw it all, his heart cracking open with a pain no illness could mimic. For greed he had expected, quarrels he had braced for, but adultery, betrayal in his own house while he feigned helplessness, was a wound too deep. Yet Rose, unwilling to let her father drown in such filth, made a decision. By dawn, she quietly arranged with the driver to carry him away from the suffocating mansion, loading a small bag of essentials and whispering to her father, "Let's go home, Daddy, to the village. Maybe there we will find peace." And so, in the hush of evening, the car rolled down the city road into red dust countryside, where the news of Chief's arrival spread like wildfire. Villagers rushing to greet him with fruits, palm wine, and tears, praising the man who had once built their school, dug their well, and sponsored their farms, their love raw and real in a way the marble mansion had forgotten. And for the first time in weeks, Williams felt something that resembled healing, not in his body, but in his spirit. For the disaster that had consumed his family was met with the pure embrace of strangers who remembered him not for his wealth, but for his kindness.
The village that had once been Williams's humble beginning now became the stage for his greatest revelation. For as the car rolled past red clay huts and palm groves into his ancestral compound, word spread with the speed of fire on dry grass. Chief has returned. Chief is sick. And by dusk, the courtyard was full of relatives, elders, and villagers bearing baskets of fruit, jars of palm wine, and heartfelt prayers, their faces lined with worry, but glowing with gratitude for the man who had once built their school, sponsored their harvest, and lifted many from poverty. And though William still coughed and feigned weakness in front of them, his eyes watered with a pain different from before. For here were people who truly valued him for his kindness, not his money, while in the city his own blood was tearing him apart. Rose stayed glued to his side, feeding him yam porridge with trembling hands, whispering, "Daddy, they love you here. Maybe there is still hope." But the turning point came when the villagers sent for a renowned herbalist, a tall, dark man with white chalk streaks on his face and a bag heavy with roots and bottles, who entered the small, mud-walled room where Williams lay, and after a long, piercing look into his eyes, said softly, "You are not as sick as they say, Chief. I see strength in you." Williams sighed deeply, and for the first time he let his guard slip, whispering, "Because I am not sick. Not truly. It was all a plan." The herbalist stiffened, leaning closer. "A plan?" Williams nodded, his voice carrying both shame and resolve. "I wanted to see who truly loved me when I could no longer give money or stand as their shield. My lawyer and doctor alone knew the truth. I pretended to be sick, pretended to be poor, and I watched, and what I saw has broken me." The herbalist's face softened, and after a long silence he replied, "You sought truth, and truth has a price. But do not despair. You are not alone. You still have your Rose, your daughter who stood by you when all others failed." Outside the door, Rose paced anxiously, not knowing what her father had confessed, only praying the herbs would work. When the herbalist finally stepped out, she rushed to him. "How is he? Please tell me he will be okay." The herbalist gave a small smile and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father is stronger than you think. What you are already doing, feeding him, staying by him, loving him, is the true medicine. Do not stop." Rose blinked in confusion, but nodded, clutching the words like a lifeline. That night, under the wide sky filled with stars, William sat outside on a wooden chair, wrapped in a thick wrapper, breathing the cool air of his youth, and turned to Rose. "There is something you must know," he said, his eyes wet with both gratitude and pain. "The sickness, the cancer, it was never real. I only wanted to test all of you." Rose gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Daddy, all this time, all this pain? You made me believe you were dying." William squeezed her hand weakly. "And yet you never left me. You bathed me, fed me, fought for me. The others showed their true selves, but you, my daughter, you showed me love. You passed the test."
Rose, though hurt, wept in silence, for the truth stung, but her father's trembling gratitude wrapped her heart with both pain and pride. And in that moment, under the glowing stars of the village night, the old lion revealed the full truth of his test, setting the stage for the reckoning to come when he returned not as a dying man, but as a living judge to his family. When the black car rolled back through the golden gates of the Williams mansion, the guards nearly dropped their rifles, for stepping out was not a frail old man clinging to life, but Chief Williams himself, upright, steady, wrapped in a clean native outfit, his eyes sharp like they had not been in months. And beside him stood Rose, carrying his small leather bag, her chin raised with quiet pride. And word spread through the compound faster than fire. "The chief is alive. The chief is strong. The chief has returned." Inside, Cynthia, lounging on the couch with her phone, turned lazily at the sound of the door and froze, her lips parting as her device slipped from her hands. "Daddy?" she stammered, her voice trembling. She rushed to him, hugging him as though he were a ghost risen from the grave, whispering, "You're walking. You're fine. You're not sick." David, bounding down the stairs with headphones around his neck, stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes wide, whispering, This can't be real." While Frank, entering from the study with a bottle of wine in hand, dropped it with a crash, shards scattering across marble as he muttered, You're alive," his face paling like a man who had seen judgment. But the heaviest silence fell when Agatha emerged from the kitchen, a glass of juice in hand, expecting the usual gloom. She stopped at the threshold, her body stiffening as her eyes landed on the man she thought would never rise again, and her grip on the glass slipped, orange liquid spilling onto the tiles as her voice cracked, Darling, you're well. You're walking." Williams did not answer, did not even glance at her. He simply walked past, straight into the master bedroom he had once been exiled from, his footsteps echoing like thunder. That night, as the family whispered in confusion, Rose climbed the stairs quietly with a tray of tea, and behind closed doors, Williams revealed his secret weapon. Beneath the bed lay a hidden box. Inside it, 3 miniature cameras and a slim black recorder, each one filled with weeks of footage, voices, and betrayals. One by one, he connected them to a small monitor, and the screen lit up with evidence. Frank firing loyal staff and hosting reckless parties. David signing away hotels and land. Cynthia plotting. Agatha embracing her lover in the boys' quarters. All of it clear and undeniable. Williams watched with heavy breath, his eyes burning not from illness, but from heartbreak sharpened into resolve. And he whispered into the phone, "Mr. John, tomorrow morning, bring everything. The time has come." Downstairs, his children sat restless, their faces pale, their hearts trembling with questions they did not dare voice, and Agatha, pacing the hallway with folded arms, felt her chest tighten with dread, for deep inside she knew that her husband had seen more than they believed, and that tomorrow, in the bright glare of truth, the masks they had worn so carelessly would finally fall.
Morning came heavy with silence, the kind of silence that crawled under the skin and warned of storms. And in the great living room of the Williams mansion, the family gathered like defendants awaiting trial. Cynthia tapping nervously at her phone, but not scrolling. David pacing with arms folded. Frank seated stiffly in the corner, his face tight with fear. And Agatha standing by the window, her wrapper tied tight around her waist, as if fabric could shield her from the reckoning she felt creeping closer. Then the door opened, and Mr. John, the lawyer, walked in with a brown leather folder, followed by Chief Williams himself, strong and steady, his cane tapping not from weakness, but authority. And as he stepped into the center of the room, the air shifted, every eye locking onto him, as if they could not believe the man they had written off as dying now stood before them alive, powerful, and filled with judgment. "I was never sick," Williams declared, his voice cutting through the room like a whip, "and I was never poor. It was all a test of love, loyalty, and truth, and each of you has shown me who you really are." Gasps broke out, but before anyone could speak, he raised a hand for silence and turned first to Frank. "You, my eldest, whom I trusted with the future of my company, you fired the loyal workers who built it. You squandered money on parties, and you opened foolish ventures that bled our accounts dry. You disgraced my name." Frank stammered, "Daddy, please, I was only trying," but Williams' glare silenced him. "You ruined your inheritance with your own hands. From today, you will never set foot in my company again. Go and build your own life with the nothing you have left." Frank dropped his face into his hands, shoulders trembling. Williams then turned to David. "And you, my son, who thought yourself clever, you sold my golden hotel, my treasured land like a gambler desperate for quick coins. You betrayed not only me, but the legacy meant to secure your future. If not for Mr. John, all would be lost. From today, you have no place in my empire. Your inheritance is the shame you carry." David fell to his knees, weeping. "Please, Father, forgive me." But the chief's heart was unyielding. Next he turned to Cynthia, his gaze sharp as a blade. "And you, my daughter, you plotted to sell land, you dressed yourself in luxury while I lay pretending to die, your heart more concerned with wigs and clothes than with your father's tears? You get nothing until you prove you can build something of your own. Only then will I reconsider." Cynthia collapsed into the sofa, crying bitterly. Finally, his gaze turned to Agatha, the woman who had shared his bed for decades. "And you, Agatha," he said slowly, his voice trembling with both rage and sorrow, After all the comfort, the love, the loyalty I gave you, you brought a stranger into my house, into my bed's shadow, while I lay feigning sickness. You disgraced not just me, but our entire name. You have 24 hours. Pack your things and leave my house. We are finished." Agatha wailed, falling to her knees. "Darling, please forgive me. I was lonely. I was weak." But Williams turned away coldly and nodded to Mr. John. "See that she leaves peacefully, but permanently." Then, softening only when his eyes fell upon Rose, he reached for her hand. "And you, my daughter, my Rose, you were the only one who stayed, who fed me, bathed me, prayed for me, carried me when I pretended to be helpless. For this, all that I have left, my estates, my businesses, my legacy, is now yours. Effective immediately, you are the new head of my empire." The room erupted. Cynthia sobbed louder. Frank clenched his fists. David covered his face. But none could argue, for the truth had been laid bare and the verdict sealed. Rose, with tears streaming down her cheeks, whispered, "Daddy, I only did what love required." And in that moment, the house that had been filled with greed and betrayal finally felt the weight of justice, heavy, undeniable, and complete.
1 year later, the empire that had once trembled on the brink of collapse now shone brighter than ever. For under the leadership of Rose Williams, the youngest daughter once overlooked, the company had not only regained its strength, but doubled its profits. Its offices buzzing with renewed energy as loyal workers, those Frank had cast out so carelessly, returned to their desks with pride, calling her Madame Rose the Wise, a title she carried with humility and grace. She reinstated policies her father had built, focused on integrity and service, and turned the family's name into a beacon of respect once more. While awards poured in and newspapers ran headlines about the miraculous revival of the Williams empire. In his private office, Chief Williams sat watching with pride as his daughter led board meetings with poise, his heart finally at peace. For though the test had torn his family apart, it had revealed the diamond among stones, the child who truly understood love beyond wealth. Frank, once the boastful heir, now worked in a rival firm as a low-level manager, his arrogance broken, his days filled with quiet regret as he often whispered to himself, "If only I had stayed loyal." While David struggled to keep afloat a modest logistics company, haunted by memories of the hotel and land he had sold in vain, his nights restless with guilt. Cynthia, humbled by her father's decree, opened a small boutique with her own savings, trying each day to prove she was no longer the selfish girl who chose wigs over family, sending Rose updates as proof of her change. And Agatha, cast out of the mansion she once ruled, disappeared into silence, her name spoken only in whispers, her betrayal a wound too deep to heal. Yet Rose, despite inheriting the empire, never allowed bitterness to rule her. She cared for her father as she always had, bringing him warm meals, listening to his stories, and reminding him that love was the foundation of every legacy worth keeping. The villagers who had once welcomed him in his darkest hour were not forgotten either. Rose built schools, clinics, and small factories in the countryside, ensuring that the people who loved her father without wealth now shared in his prosperity. And so, the story that began with a test of love ended with a revelation that money can buy loyalty, but not hearts, that wealth may gather shadows, but only true love stands in the light. Chief Williams, looking out over the thriving empire he had built and passed on, whispered one evening to himself, "When I tested them, I thought I might lose everything, but in truth, I gained the only thing that matters, truth itself." His eyes turned to Rose, leading her people with courage, and he smiled, knowing his legacy was safe. And for those who heard this tale, it carried a warning and a blessing. Beware of those who love only your fortune, for when the fortune fades, so will they. But treasure those who love you when you are weak, for they are worth more than all the gold in the world. If you were in Chief William's shoes, would you dare to test your family this way? Would you risk heartbreak for the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales that reveal the hidden truths of love, loyalty, and betrayal.